number. You can call me anytime at 443-660-7131. All right. Hello, Baltimore. Hello, DC. Hello, Virginia. I am Ramona Jones-McClain. I am your insurance guru. I am a farmer's agent in Reisterstown, Maryland, and I am here to talk to you about all things insurance. This is February, Black History Month, and I want to say a happy Black History Month to everyone out there as we celebrate our heroes and we talk about the legacies that they have left behind and give you information that you needed to know, you didn't know, or perhaps you should know. Today, but as you know, even though we talk about current events and we talk about activities and we relate things to real life, everything is always about insurance. Okay, so as we move forward, today we're going to talk about, actually today, next week, and the week after next. As I was looking at the research for this week's show, I realized that this was something that we could actually talk about for the rest of this month before we get back into what's going on with our auto insurance rates. So today we're going to talk about Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King, which is one of our most recent times, because there are a lot of individuals in our African American history that are notable, that have done many things, from Crispus Attucks, who fought in the Revolutionary War, to Washington Carver, who created like 1 million uses for the peanut. We've got the first African-American surgeon, doctors, literaries, the first African-American newspaper. There are a lot of notable things that many great African-Americans have done throughout history. But in relation to, because of the many things that we've done, I think that many times we get caught up in the struggle of doing the things that advance our community at large. We forget to take care of the things that should be first. Even the Word of God says, what have you have to do with my church if you have not taken care of your home? And one of the things I've been looking at, and has come up in the past on several of my shows, is what happens when these great individuals pass. How are they managing and taking care of their estate? And part of it is because of some of the things that they're doing in the moment. They don't realize, I think, and this is my opinion, how great their impact will be on future generations. I'm pretty sure George Washington Carver just wanted to be useful. He wanted to create something that could economically advance his people. He had no idea that 100 years later we would still be talking about him. And if he had, he probably would have prepared better. And I think that from the standpoint of our greatness as a community, we should always prepare for where we think we're going and not where we think we currently are. And I think that could have possibly been the case with Dr. Martin Luther King. He considered himself the moral compass of the civil rights movement and constantly worked toward the betterment of not just our community, but people who are economically challenged from a whole. People who suffered injustice across race, creed, economic barriers, period. And so he's not just a hero of the African American community, he is a hero to many. But I don't think he intended that to be the case. He just wanted to do the right thing. And in its efforts, he perhaps left his children behind some. So I'm just going to go over some of the information that I pulled up. There's an article on the internet that you can get written by Kurt Urchenwald. It was released in 2014, and what it does is it talks about the King Center. Now, the King Center is, let me see, the King Center is called the King Center for the Martin Luther King Center for Social Change. It was created by Dr. Coretta Scott King after her husband's death to continue his legacy, the things that he fought for. She put it together well. She put together an excellent board of directors and different individuals who worked with her husband while he was alive. She raised money. She set the foundation up. And this was a center that was designed to memorialize him as well as continue the work that he had begun. In 2014, there was a lawsuit filed by Martin Luther King III and his younger brother, Dexter, to depose Minister Bernice King as the executive director or chief executive of the nonprofit. Bernice, who had been the director for a small amount of time, who basically had taken over and pushed Dexter out after they had gotten into a disagreement over the disposition of her parents' estates. And some of those dispositions included Coretta Scott King was, first of all, the executive director of the board until, I believe, 1988. Let me go back in here. Until 1988, where she wanted one of the children to take over. Yolanda, Bernice, and Martin were doing other things. Bernice wanted to be a minister. Martin was working with different civil rights organizations. Yolanda was off doing other things. And the only one that was available was Dexter, who, by the way, had dropped out of college. He didn't do well. He wanted to go to the University of South Carolina on a sports scholarship and kind of felt pressure to attend Morehouse like his father did because it was his father's legacy. However, Dexter reluctantly took over, and at the same time, they created an entity called King Incorporated, in which the King Incorporated was the siblings and the mother coming together, owning the rights of his father's papers, speeches, and that's one of the things that Martin Luther King did do. He did before he passed away, he copywrote his I Have a Dream speech, including many other speeches and sermons and writings that he had. But there was also notes, other things, letters. For example, I believe there was a letter that was written by him when he was arrested for the first time. All of these things, most of them were copywritten by Martin Luther King, as he did have foresight to do that. In addition to that, this was set up after his death into a company called King Incorporated, which owned all the rights. Dexter, the youngest son, conveniently named himself chairperson of King Incorporated, and basically was became ultimately the executor of the nonprofit organization, and King Incorporated, which is a for-profit company designed to manage the rights of his father's speeches, writings, etc., that someone may want to use in the public. and or on the air in advertising. I understand there was like a cell phone ad that was created very untactfully, or to use his father's words and image to sell cell phones for Black History Month. For this was back in 1999, which the family disagreed with, and so began the disputes between them. According to this article, the King Center up until 1988 was ran out of Coretta Scott's basement, and there is a building that was adjacent to Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is where her father-in-law and her father pastored, and that building became assigned to the King Center, and around that, and the land around it, they began to build a memorial, including a pond and a place to store all the papers, among other things. When Dexter became the executive director in 1989, many argued that he was unqualified for the job, which sort of deepened, I think, Dexter's resentment. He was the youngest, did not remember his father as much as the other, or was able to spend as much time with him as he originally wanted to, and I think knew only really of what he had read about his father, not specifically information in itself. In 1994, the King Center was on the brink of bankruptcy, and Dexter took over and switched it from more of a civil service entity to a civil service entity to a nonprofit, from a nonprofit civil service entity to more of something that was intended for the use of propagating his father's legacy, as he is accused. He declared that the center had never been a civil rights organization. He cut the staff and its programs. He purged the board, and he created what was considered a new corporate ethos. Of course, some of the siblings were not happy about this, even though the mother was still alive. Not exactly sure what her statement was on it. He also began under King Incorporated, known as the estate of Martin Luther King Jr., which held the rights to his speeches, his images, and any type of valuable facet of his life. Dexter worked with one of his friends to create Intellectual Properties Management Incorporated, which is a licensing deal maker for the estate. Under the leadership of Dexter, he focused on economic activism. He leased his father's word in images and spoke fondly of different commercials, entities, and several different programs. He said he planned to build a for-profit museum with holographic projections of his father delivering his famous speeches. Dexter also look out for organizations trying to inappropriately use, and of course, he fined and heavily pursued any organization that inappropriately used his father's image without compensation. Of course, people began to complain that this was about money. And that's kind of where we leave off, that it's all about money, the grab for money, how to use their father's legacy to make money, and how to create a profit-making center. Even though his father's friend, Andrew Young, tried to talk to him and say there is a difference in creating a profit-making center and profiteering. All the time, the center was on the brink of bankruptcy, Dexter paid himself an annual salary of $180,000, while his publishing company, his licensing company, also benefited from over $2 million annually from the licensing of, from the centers, the King Center's use of the image, words, and licensing for other things. And at this point, the other siblings are idly standing by until Dexter starts to try to auction off his father's papers. And he tries to auction off his father's home that he grew up in. He attempts to auction off, after his mother passed, the home that she grew up in. And the other siblings are upset because basically what he's doing is he's releasing the physical properties of these items so they can be kept in the Library of Congress or the State Museum, but he's still maintaining the synchronization as well as licensing properties of these items. Then it really came to a head in, I believe it was 2000, and after his mother passed. And she had some love letters from their father that she had hid under her mattress all these years, believe it or not. And she had been previously exploring an autobiography with a particular company prior to her death, and decided that she did not like the direction it was going in, and decided to pull back and refuse to provide them with the stuff. And in addition to that, there's also audio recordings that, of course, had been released to the family. Well, we know they came from the FBI, between conversations between Martin and his wife, in which they allowed for, in which they were going to use to allow to assist in putting the book together. Apparently, he had a deal that had been brokered and indicated that his sister, Bernice, needed to turn over the love letters, which belonged to her mother's estate, in which she was the executor of, not Dexter, because they were written by the father and therefore belonged to him. Of course, Bernice, if anyone has ever seen her in the public, stood her ground and refused to turn over the letters till this day. But what we're seeing is this going back and forth. We had a father who had the foresight to copyright his literary works, his speeches, his sermons, his notes, and it's documented. So we have a train of, what do they call it? A train of evidence. A clear train of evidence where we know these belong to Dr. Martin Luther King. We know these are his words. They've been written and filed and copywritten, and his estate, King Incorporated, which apparently is run by Dexter, owns the rights and the right to use them, and for anyone who wants to use the image, likeness, and words of their father. And then you have the nonprofit organization that was designed or created to continue the work that their father had finished, that is basically being squabbled over between three of the siblings. Not Yolanda. In fact, most of her influence in here is non-existent. And only when it comes to the autobiographical literary work that was proposed for the mother, do you see her come up supposedly as accused. And a lot of what's going on, if you read the article, it's just bad business practice. Because Dexter is the executive director and chairman of both. He's creating documents. He's saying that while I was in place, I could legally do this, and I put this in place, and I passed this, and I said I could appoint members of the board at will. So you may push me out and take over and change the locks, but I have the right to reappoint the board of directors, and ultimately they will vote me back in, which is kind of what was happening back and forth. And even though Bernice King is still listed as the chairperson or the executive director of the nonprofit today, she held her ground. I understand that most recently there will be a new executive director appointed, which is none of the family members, which I think is a good idea. And I think what you have here is some lack of direction, that when you are dealing with famous individuals who possibly are doing things that are going to be memorable, are going to change history, even if you're not that person. Okay, even if all you have is a little church on the corner, and you have sermons that you've written, and things that, ideas that you created, programs that you created, concepts that that are necessary for your current activities, you need to protect them. So myself, I have written over, I think it's 9 plays. Nine plays. I've written over 42 songs. Now, for me, most of them I copyright within my my plays. So the songs that I've written to go with the plays are listed, are copyrighted in the plays. There was not a will, and probably because it was presumed that when Martin Luther King passed, there would be, everything would go to his wife, which is what did. But considering the disposition between the siblings that occurred between the father's death and the mother's death, there was some level of estate planning that needed to occur. There was something that needed to be in place. For example, the information that was needed to distinguish, to eliminate some of the squabbling. Just simply, someone with some point of leadership to step up and just say, hey, this needs to end. And there are friends from Dr. King that worked with him that did sort of come in place and indicate that, hey, you guys need to stop arguing. And it looks bad. It looks bad to the community. It looks bad to his legacy. It looks bad to the purpose that he lived his life, and that his legacy should be maintained. And it really, honestly, only requires just a small bit of information to be put in writing, to provide direction, despite the fact that you may not like what your dad did not want to leave this to you. Your dad did not want to put this in your hands. Just take the time to put in writing what you intend to happen when you are no longer here with the things that you are leaving behind. It's really just that simple, and it's important. And I think part of it, in addition to that, because one of the things that is really driving this is the fact that it's about the money. You have a wife that was left without the breadwinner, and like it or not, that during that time the culture was for many for the wife to stay at home and take care of the children, and the husband to go out and generate revenue. So you have a husband that's gone and the wife's there without money. What impact was that? How could she generate money? How could she create revenue to sustain just the basic things in her household? Possibly she continued to receive a salary from the church, which he passed it. It's very possible. And that allowed them to keep going. But what level of struggle did that create in the children? Because at this point, honestly, it just seems like they're grabbing at things. Maybe the pressure to be as important and substantial as your parent, or the pressure to have the impact of your parent, or the idea, and this is just real talk from being a pastor's daughter, the fact that the community has taken and gotten so much from your father, I deserve to get a piece myself. So if you want to remember him, then you're going to have to pay me to get a piece of him. And I'm paraphrasing, but that seems like to be some of what is coming out of it. And I think that it requires a little bit of work. First of all, life insurance would have done a lot. Life insurance would have positioned the family financially to focus more on the mission of their father instead of what was not left behind to them. And that's just the beginning. That's just where we start. If you don't have life insurance in place, get it now. I don't care if all you own is your car, or if you own 3, 4, 5 houses, farmland in North Carolina. Your mother wrote a book 20 years ago. You wrote a book 20 years ago and nobody bought it. You have no idea the value that it would be 20 years from now. It doesn't matter. Life insurance is where we start. Life insurance is where we begin, because when it comes to selling estates, especially not when it goes from husband to wife, but when it goes from from parents to children, there are costs associated with it. Okay, we're going to take a station identification and talk to you when we come back. All right, we are back. So listen, we were supposed to have attorney Nick McDaniels on the air with us today to talk about estate planning and trust. One of the things that was not set up under the King situation is, not to mention that there was no life insurance. We know that if you have not started there, that's the first place to start. If you got questions or you want to make comments, please give me a call at 410-481-1010. If you're shy and you don't want to put your business on the air, you can always call our office at 443-660-7131, and we'll be happy to discuss your specific case with you. But so we know right now, we begin with life insurance, right? Life insurance, number one, provides the funds to cover estate and probate costs. We're going to talk about that more next week when we look at Aretha Franklin. Okay, so next week we're going to look at Aretha Franklin and talk about what's going on with her estate and what's going on with her situation and her 4 boys. Right now we're dealing with the 4 children of Dr. Martin Luther King, 2 boys, 2 girls, and basically they are never on the same page. One's fighting against the other, the 2 are fighting against the other 2. Usually at the center of it, all of it, is the youngest Dexter, who is the one that...
guest on the line?
All right, who is the one that knew him less and the one who is pretty much causing most of the dissent. I have Mr. Attorney Nick McDaniels. How are you?
Hi, Miss Ramona. How are you?
Very good. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. It's so great to talk to you. Sorry about I'm a few minutes late. Colin was dealing with a client in crisis, but you know how that goes. And we always want to prioritize what we're doing with the ones that we serve, right?
Absolutely. I'm hoping that, so I just wanted to let you know, I'm going to be talking about estate and wills and dispositions for the next 3 weeks. Next week, we're talking about Aretha Franklin. And the week after that, we're going to talk about James Brown. Will you be available all those times?
I mean, look, Miss Ramona, if I had a little hole in my schedule, I'm telling you've got first dibs on it.
Absolutely. Just let me know.
You need. I'm happy to be available.
Absolutely. So we were talking about Martin Luther King and the issues that were going on with the King Center, which is the nonprofit that his wife created, and the King Incorporated, which is the for-profit that owns the rights to his speeches, his notes, his books, everything that he wrote, and which one of the things Dr. King did have the foresight to do is he copyrighted all of his speeches, all of his sermons, all of his notes that he created before he passed. So that he did have the foresight to do. However, there is no trust. There is no there was no will. And there was nothing put in place to determine who would govern them over the next 20 to 30 to 50. At this point, it's over 50 years now since he passed. And so I think my question is, like, how could he have done this better? Because he did do something. He just didn't do everything. And what it has done over the last 20 years created constant dissent and struggle between the siblings, especially now that the mother has passed. You have the younger son who is literally changing and creating documents and stating that the nonprofit was never meant to be a civil rights organization. And trying to sell off his father's home he grew up in, trying to auction off his mother's home. The siblings go in and stop it, and then 2 years later he goes off to now he's trying to force his sister to turn over the love letters that his father wrote to his mother. So what do you have to say?
Right, we see these kinds of stories, I mean, all the time, particularly with celebrity or famous people or the ultra wealthy that have passed away. It's as you know, particularly tragic in Dr. King's situation because, as you know, all of this kind of fighting and I'll just say it, be honest, kind of the greed that has kind of risen to the top after his passing, and even 5 decades after his passing, and let's not call it a passing. Let's call it what it was after his murder. It's particularly tragic because people, those sorts of beliefs and money-hungry behaviors don't at all live out that man's mission,
right?
And his legacy. To answer your question, you're right. I mean, going through the copyright process, and I know you personally, and I know your listeners probably know at this point, have gone through that. You yourself are, an artist and a creator and somebody that knows a thing or two about that. And that is step one. If you are somebody who is a creative person, whether it be probably the world's most famous civil rights leader or somebody who is, a painter or a musician or something like that, making sure that your work is somehow protected in a way that it can't be co-opted later on.
Right.
The problem is that only goes so far because somebody still ultimately is able to control those things, right? And establishing trusts, well, those are only as good as potentially the trustees that are in charge of those things, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And the parameters that those trustees are governed by, and that's all. Again, 50 years is a lot of foresight to have. The world is a very different place than it was in the 1960s.
Right.
Today, but a little bit of long-term planning can help you try to protect from advances in the world and the way that things become as much as possible.
And petty
obviously is a big deal.
Right, and petty grievances among siblings. I was explaining them being a pastor's daughter myself. It is very easy, and these are not my feelings. Just want to put that out there, Daddy. Okay, it is very easy for right.
I've shared that with you before, right? I got preachers on both sides.
Right,
of my family. I know that.
Right, but it's very easy for pastor's children to be resentful because they give so much to the public, and sometimes there's so little left behind for the children, especially the youngest one, which is the one causing most of the trouble here, Dexter, who I think was only 2 years old when his father passed, so he barely knew him, versus the older one, which was 12, I think one was 9 and one was 7, who had time to understand and learn about the values that their father had. It's difficult. It's easy to understand resentments that occur, but as parents, what you want to do is have the foresight for that and put things in place that help develop the character of your children even after they're not here, even if it's to protect them from themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think the real issue here is trying to maintain as much control as possible even after you pass away, to make sure that things are handled the way that you want them to be handled. And there's no way to do it completely 100% perfectly. And as we know, family interactions are about as personal as they possibly get, and the personalities, the clashes that develop in those things really, really, really kind of come to the surface in real contest situations or estate situations. I mean, how could Dr. King have done those things differently? To be quite frank, he probably wouldn't have, because that wasn't what he was working on.
Right.
Thinking about him, he certainly had a notion of his legacy and what he wanted his legacy to be. But in terms of the nuts and bolts of actually providing the kind of wills and those documents to be in place for his family, that wasn't his top focus. He had much bigger, much more important things that he was working on, and I think we're all grateful for that. Having a will would have been tremendous.
Yeah.
Right? And you don't have to have the fame. I don't want to use the term wealth necessarily, because it's not that.
Well, because at the time he didn't
poverty or anything.
Right, but at the time he didn't have wealth. You know what I mean? He had no idea that his image alone, that people would pay $1 million just to use his image. You know what I mean? He had no idea that that would occur. But I think that in hindsight, in the last 50 years, and I'm speaking to those who are political people now in the community, those who are activists now, like the founder of Black Lives Matter. Not that she's going to be as great as Dr. King, but you need to learn from his experience, where you need to protect your family as well as your community, because you don't want them arguing over stupid stuff like whether or not we should sell his Bible. You know?
And that's stuff that a simple will, regardless of And when I say a simple will, I don't mean necessarily a one-page document, but just because you are somebody with the renown of Reverend King, you can still get by and accomplish these goals or avoid the risks that you're talking about with a 10-page document. You can have that control to limit what people can fight over. And a good attorney probably could have sat down with him had he had the time, and he was surrounded by great legal minds at all times.
He really was.
If you go back through all the photos, but could have probably sat down and crafted something, even if it was fairly simple, that would have helped avoid a lot of this stuff.
Right, and dealing with also too.
People want to challenge.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
I said, but also dealing with too. It was.
You go first.
It was 1960 something, and at that time in the African American community, you're still dealing with the stigmatism of talking about death. Period. Okay, which I hope.
Yeah, I mean, that's in the 60s. It's still today. I mean, you know that.
Yes.
It's still very, very much today, right? I mean, it's and you deal with it in insurance and stuff like that. It is a much more challenging conversation, I think, with clients who are Black clients, female clients. Those conversations are still very much private. They're family. They're in-house.
Right.
And to seek out professional help is not something that people are willing to do. But I think there's great people in the community like you that are really trying to bridge those gaps, right? I mean, I do a ton of that work too. But saying like, look, this is not something that we talk about a lot, and we need to. Right?
Yes.
I mean, healthcare, those sorts of things.
Because
healthy diet. I mean, all of these things that we've always just kind of pushed under the rug in the community, and getting to that place where we say, you know what, look, if it's good enough for the Rockefellers to do all this stuff, somebody else.
It's just, and the thing is,
we need to be open and honest about this.
It doesn't matter if all you have is your retirement account at your job, or whether you own farmland, properties, or you wrote a poem, right, 20 years ago for your grandfather at the funeral, and your daughter finds the poem and decides to go publish it, and the Baltimore Sun picks it up and publishes it because now it's relevant to what's going on now. And not only now does the Baltimore Sun have it, and somebody else wants to publish it, and now it's been read on Oprah's book club. You understand what I'm saying? Even if you think you have done nothing, okay, and you created anything, you need to protect it. You need to.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I think the thing that I would want to impress upon people the most is, hopefully there's some young person listening to you there that one day will achieve the greatness of Dr. King. But many of us won't. And what would have probably worked for Dr. King is something that can easily be created and work for all of us.
Absolutely.
And there's no reason not to have it. There's no reason not to be prepared and have it. I mean, look, Mr. Moni, I don't have a lot of riches, but I got a will in place. And, if things go south, at least I know that my family will be taken care of in the best way that I know possible, that will very explicitly limit any possibility for there to be fighting and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And even if it's just a paragraph that tells your children, your family, your relatives what you wanted when you are no longer here. Just something, it just alleviates the debate on who you were and what you wanted. And that is so important. At the time when everything is going wrong, that is the last thing you want to have to think about. What did my daddy want? What did my mother want?
I'm pretty. I admire, I have what I consider to be a great honor. I mean, I sit often with people that are nearing the end. You know, I mean, I sat next to people at their hospital beds and helped them with stuff. I've sat next to people in their home and helped them with things when they know, hey, the time is limited. And I've been very impressed, honored, humbled to hear that courage from people that are doing that. And I wish more people would.
Absolutely.
And the peace of mind that you get from that is invaluable. I mean, I've literally, I've held people's hands as they've been, I mean, to maybe use a morbid term, but on their deathbed and just been able to see kind of the relief that they've got knowing, okay, this is done and this is in place and I don't have to worry about those things anymore, because whether we like to talk about it or not, we all think about it.
Right.
and being comfortable enough to talk with trusted professionals like yourself or somebody in the practice of law like me, you should be able to be just as honest and open and thoughtful with us as you would be with your physician or whoever that you might see for any other issues. Absolutely.
So, Mr. McDaniels, please give our audience your information so they can reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again for having me on. I hope to be part of more of these conversations. I'm excited to hear more about the James Brown issue and stuff too. And you ever into the Michael Jackson stuff, like I love that as well. That's I mean, it's far reaching. So
I'll pick that up as well too. I'll pick that up as well as too. I said I will look into that one as well as too. Next week we're going to talk about Aretha Franklin though, which is
love it. Hey, I'm here for that. I might just need to listen in so I can get those details. So my information is pretty simple. I'm Nick McDaniels. I'm an attorney. I have offices in Baltimore and Frederick. I can be reached at 301-818-0405, or my email address is Nick, that's N-I-C-K, at lewismcdaniels.com. You can visit our website. I mean, I make house calls. I really try to put a very personal touch on this, because these conversations are personal. They're challenging, and because of those things, that's why they're so important. And we like to keep that focus in our law practice.
Yes, absolutely.
Before you go, there's a caller. Before you go.
Okay, before you close. Okay, we got a caller. Hi, it's Ramona and Nick on the phone. How can we help you?
Yes, hello?
Yes, how are you?
Hello? Yeah, my name is Tyrone. I was just wanting to comment here. Dr. King, a man like Dr. King, or a person like Dr. King, probably comes around once in a century. Okay, that's how potent he was in his ability to challenge the American system of apartheid. And we got to understand that Dr. King, as a result of that, received 50 death threats a day.
Right.
And a lot of people understand by the time he did die, because, he stood by his principles. He went against the Vietnam War. He lost a lot of popularity. And he only had like a 12% approval rating. He only had a 12% approval rating by the time he died. There were preachers that were against him coming to their chambers.
Right.
He wasn't no big civil rights teddy bear, as we remember him as. There were a lot of people that hated Dr. King and wanted to stop his work. And that, as a result, he was murdered.
Right.
In the case. And as far as his legacy, I would think that Coretta Scott King, who was about equal to him in intellect, his wife, a very strong black woman, I think that it was up to her to preserve his legacy, because everything, I would think that things would go to her as a matter of probate after he died.
Well, one of the things Tyrone, one of the things we're talking about is one of the reasons why I think he, first of all, knowledge was not as prevalent with respect to what could and could not be set up to protect your financial and your literary legacy. He didn't do something, so he didn't do nothing. He did something. He did protect his literary works. He copyrighted. But one of the things that we do know, that when in fact a husband passes away, things automatically go to the wife. What they did not have was the right.
So I would think
what
would be more,
I understand, but what we did not have was the information that was necessary to protect when things are inherited from a parent to a child. And that's what we're talking about. Some of the things were not even legally in place when he passed away. What we're trying to do is to use his example so you can be more informed of what you need to do to protect your legacy.
Absolutely. And one more thing, Dr. King probably died broke because a lot of people don't understand that Dr. King was so busy in his work that people like Harry Belafonte and City 48 would pay his bills.
Right.
So, you know, and he could have been the greatest mega preacher in history if he wanted to be. He was that good.
Well, he didn't die broke. He didn't die broke.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, he was, what I'm saying is that people like, this is a fact, Harry Belafonte, and people like that would actually chip in to pay his bills.
Well, I'm not denying that, but we're not talking about his right. No, I'm not denying that. I agree. And even when they set up the foundation, Harry Belafonte as well as Andrew Young provided donations to set up the King Center. So no, I'm not denying that. I'm talking about long term. The things that you create, the things that you think have no value today, which may have value tomorrow. I'm asking us as a community to start thinking about that. Like that broken down house that is in Baltimore City. And that broken down house that's in Baltimore City that your grandmother owned 20 years ago, it's just been sitting and rotten. And now some developer comes up and wants to pay you $300,000 so he can take the land. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about recognizing. Right.
I get it. I just want to mention that we can't underestimate the greatness of Dr. King and his sacrifice.
Oh, absolutely not. And I even spoke to a testament to that as a minister's daughter myself. That quite frequently they give more to the community than they do into their own home. And this is just a part of the life that we accept.
Yeah. And when he met Malcolm X, one of the first things Malcolm X said to him, when Malcolm X saw him outside of him, he said that you and I, you know, one thing about you and I that we do have in common is that we're both dead now.
Yeah.
3 years later, we're both dead.
Yes.
Thanks for your time. Every day.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. Did you want to say anything, Mr. McDaniels?
No, I very much appreciate everything that caller was saying too. I mean, I think that's speaking to the point that you're trying to prove, and I really enjoyed that little insight about Malcolm X. That was actually one that I hadn't heard before. So we appreciate you having me on here, and very hopeful that we can continue to do our work and bridge these gaps and help people be more comfortable with these conversations.
Absolutely. And just so you know, my assistant just texted me that when Martin Luther King passed away, he had $6,000, which is not a lot today, but back then is not a little bit. And I do know that
he wasn't a pauper. He wasn't starving. He wasn't starving, but he wasn't wealthy. So
right. And I want to get rid of the misnomer that because you are not Michael Jackson, that you don't deserve to create an estate or a trust or protect what you do have and protect your family.
Yeah, something that would have worked for people like you and I, who I think are both successful professionals and do very well for ourselves, but I don't think either of us are rich, right?
No.
Would have worked for Dr. King and would work for anybody else, right? And I think that's the important part, is getting that conversation started.
Absolutely. So call Nick McDaniels today so you can get your trust. All right, I want to thank you so much for listening this week. I am Ramona Jones-McClain, your insurance guru. And for the next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about the estates, the legacy, the disposition of wills or lack of wills, the lack of life insurance for several African-American heroes who have passed away, and how can we take the lessons from their life and apply it to ours. If you need to call me during the week, I'm at 443-660-7131. Please don't forget to look up our attorney, Nick McDaniels. If you want to talk, if you need his number, please call me. There's a number in here, 443-340-7323. Is that your number, Mr. McDaniels?
Yeah, Ms. Ramona, that'll work. The office number is 301-818-0405, and the other one is my cell. People can call me on either one of them.
All right. And listen, we want to continue to, yes, we want to continue to talk about this and to help you. Thank you so much. I will see you next Thursday. Oh.